Hey everybody, thanks for being here. Just want to let you know that there are still folks filtering in, which is great. Appreciate the good turnout. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes though. There is water at the back if anybody would like some water. All right, everybody, we are going to get underway. So I want to start by saying good evening and welcome to the Nanaimo Ladysmith All Candidates Forum, which tonight is being co-hosted by the Regional District of Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Regional Hospital District. My name is Ian Thorpe, and it's my privilege to be the chair of the Nanaimo Regional Hospital District Board. So I'm certainly very pleased to be opening the forum this evening on behalf of the RDN and the NRHD. I would like to acknowledge that RDN Chair Vanessa Craig is in the audience, along with CAO Doug Holmes. We also have Mayor Krogh of the City of Nanaimo and Councillor Aaron Hemmons, and I hope I haven't missed any other councillors or RDN members. Oh, Director Melanson. Incognito, thank you for being here. And I would next like to start by respectfully acknowledging that we are holding this gathering on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Now, the purpose of the forum this evening is to provide you, the residents, an opportunity to hear from your MLA candidates, to gather information that hopefully you will find useful in making an informed decision for the provincial election coming up on October 19th. And we really do hope that you find this opportunity engaging and helpful with your decision making. Just a few housekeeping items before I turn it over to our moderators. Washrooms are located just across the hallway, across from the back door of this room, if you need to use those. We will try our best to end the forum promptly at 8:30 to allow time for a short informal meet and greet with the candidates following the end of the questioning session. The forum will be recorded and later posted to the RDN YouTube web channel. And my understanding is also that the forum will be broadcast by Czech News, Nanaimo News Now, and Rogers Community TV. We do ask that you keep your cell phones on vibrate. We acknowledge that you may have family or children at home this evening. You might have to receive a call during the event, and if so, we understand that, but please step out of the room and then return after completing the call. Our moderators, who I will introduce in just a moment, will conduct the meeting, and they have the responsibility to interrupt the proceedings to enforce the forum format if needed. They will go over that with you. We ask that candidates and audience members, of course, respect the authority of the moderators, as I'm sure you will. I would like to thank the three candidates seated behind me up on the stage. They'll be introduced in a moment, and they will have an opportunity also to introduce themselves and tell something about themselves, as well as answer your questions. We would also like to thank our media partners, Czech News, Nanaimo News Now, Pattison Media, and Rogers Community TV, who will be broadcasting the forum at a later time and making the recording available online. Now, our moderators, to my left, very pleased to welcome this evening, first of all, Mr. Kim Smythe. Give us a wave, Kim, or stand up.
How about both?
I'm sure many of you know Kim. He is the former president and CEO of the Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce, now operates a consultancy working with both government and the private sector, with a career rooted in strategic problem solving, advocacy, and network building. Kim also specializes in strengthening nonprofits, social enterprise, and creative entrepreneurship to help drive regional economic development. So Kim, thank you for your time this evening. Next to Kim is Kendall Hansen from Czech News, a face that will be familiar to many of you. Kendall has been reporting news on Vancouver Island for 25 years, the majority as a video journalist with Czech, based here in Nanaimo. He covers stories north of the Malahat to Tofino and as far north as Port Hardy. He is a member of the Canadian Association of Journalists, and he's also a family man here in Nanaimo with a wife and two daughters, and he's just a nice guy. Kendall Hansen, thank you very much for being here. And sitting with our moderators is another important person this evening from the Regional District of Nanaimo, Gail Smith, who is on staff and is here this evening in the role of timekeeper. Thank you very much, Gail. So, thank you. Again, that's enough for me, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. I hope you find it informative this evening. I'm going to turn things over to the moderators to fill you in more precisely on the details of the evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Thorpe. So before we hear from the candidates and their introductions, we're just going to go over a few rules. We got rules for stuff like this, and also the format. Audience members, you're probably wondering if you can ask a question tonight. The quick answer is no. People were invited to submit questions in advance by online submission or email prior to the forum. Questions were selected from the submissions received, and regional topics have been brought forward by the RDN and NRHD boards over the past year, and so we thank you to those who submitted questions. We ask that each candidate respect the clock. We will have a timer to help you, and we'll hold up a 30-second sign to wrap up your opening statement, as Gail shows here, to responses and questions. Our timekeeper will hold up the 30-second sign as your time draws to a close.
I think it's my
I
turn.
walked right over your spot.
Yeah, we're off to a good start. He just walked all over my lines. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves and give an opening statement on their party's election platform. Following the round of introductions, we will ask candidates for the predetermined questions. Candidates were provided questions in advance and have had time to prepare a response.
Each candidate will be given up to 2 minutes to respond to the question without interruptions from the other candidates or members of the public in the audience, and the timekeeper will provide a 30-second signal and then will ring a bell to signal the candidate's time is up.
Actually don't have a bell.
Oh, okay. We will interrupt very loudly because there is no bell.
Following the round of responses to each question, candidates will have the opportunity for a brief 1-minute rebuttal. We ask that candidates hold up their green rebuttal sign. Should they want to offer rebuttal, there will be a limit of 2 rebuttals for each candidate during the evening.
Candidates are expected to speak with a courteous and professional tone and are only permitted to speak when it's their turn. Candidates must also refrain from making any sounds or gestures that may be considered distracting while others are speaking. Failure to behave appropriately will result in a warning from the moderators. And this should go without saying. Tonight is not clothing optional. While the debate may get heated, let's keep it family friendly.
Audience sounds and gestures to show agreement or disagreement, i.e. clapping and other gestures, are permitted. However, they must be made in a courteous tone and manner and are very brief so as not to cut into the time the candidates have and must only happen when the candidates are not speaking. If it becomes disruptive, the moderators reserve the right to ask the audience to refrain from certain behaviors.
We will begin with candidate introductions and opening remarks by alphabetical order of last name, starting with George Anderson, Gwen O'Mahony, and then Leah Versaville of the BC Green Party. And George, we'll open up with you first.
Thank you very much, Kendall, and I can see that those comedy classes are working out. Maybe stick with the day job, but teasing. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. It's so great to see so many people participating in our democracy. Again, thank you to the RDN for hosting this event, and also thank you to the fellow candidates as well, because democracy is so important, especially in this time and age right now where we're dealing with so many difficult issues. A little bit about me, as I was born and raised in Nanaimo. I was on City Council and the Regional District from 2011 to 2014. I'm the past president of Literacy Central Vancouver Island, and I'm currently the chair of the Board of Governors at Vancouver Island University. And for those of you who are curious, in my spare time, I'm a corporate lawyer at one of Canada's largest law firms. One of the reasons that I chose to run in this election is that we've needed a government that is focused on people. For so long, the BC Conservatives and John Ristad focused on cancelling programs, cancelling education, cancelling healthcare. I lived through those times in the 2000s where classroom sizes got larger, where there wasn't nurses, there weren't doctors. And what is the product that we have today? A period of time where people do not have access to family doctors. And that is particularly because of the fact that people like John Ristad made purposeful cuts to healthcare and education. This government in 7 years has invested significantly in Nanaimo. We've seen intensive care unit, we've seen a new acuity unit that is in the process of being built and is in construction. We've announced a BC Cancer Centre here in Nanaimo. Instead of people having to travel from Tofino all the way to Victoria or Nanaimo to Victoria, people can stay in their communities, stay close to their families. And that's what's important. And that's what's at stake at this election, is a government that's focused on people, not focused on conspiracy theories, not a government of people who are talking about things that just don't matter and talking about cuts, $4.1 billion worth of cuts. And that's what John Ristad has focused his entire career on. David Eby and the BC NDP are focused on people, and that's why I decided to run, because I've always focused my time on trying to help Nanaimo realize its potential. Thank you for the time card there, by the way. Much appreciated. Again, this is an important election, and there's too much at risk to allow people like the BC Conservatives and my friend here, Ms. O'Mahony, to even be close to government. If you look at the individuals that they've chosen as their candidates, it's clear they are not serious and they're not individuals who should be anywhere close to governing. Thank you.
We will now hear from Gwen O'Mahony.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. This is Democracy in Action, and one of you astute people in the audience pointed out that my microphone is orange. Let me be clear, I'm not orange anymore. I'm Gwenna Mahoney, and I am the Conservative Party of BC candidate, the underdog in the race that started when I had a 2% chance of winning, and boy, have those polls ever tightened. But let me back up a little bit and explain my journey. I was born and raised in Campbell River in the North Island, and my family, we were all NDP supporters. Forestry built our community, and a lot of people in my family worked in forestry, and they were good paid, unionized jobs. And like many people who graduate from the North Island, I moved to the mainland to get my degree, which was in biology and literature. And while I was out there, I just happened to get politically active, and I've run many times. I ran in 2009 under an Axe the Carbon Tax campaign for the NDP under the leadership of Carol James. I ran again as a federal candidate for Jack Layton in 2011. And in 2012, I was elected as the first woman and New Democrat in a Conservative riding. And yes, I get the irony that I am running as a Conservative in a considered NDP riding. I loved being an MLA. I enjoyed the work. My motto in the way that I work with people in the community is in the words of Eleanor Roosevelt: when you're dealing with yourself, you use your brain, but when you're working with others, you use your heart. So I moved back, we'll fast forward, came to Nanaimo, because I always wanted to return to the island. Let's face it, this is paradise. I did my MBA at Vancouver Island University, resided here in Nanaimo. But as the years went by, I started recognizing that our communities were in serious trouble. You see, my family has wrestled with addiction, and I started noticing that this province was in a complete crisis. A crisis when it comes to healthcare, a crisis in affordability, and a crisis with drug addiction and mental health support. Now, my good friend George over here is going to tell you there isn't a problem, but I'm here to say that there is a problem. And what we need are bold solutions. We should be unafraid to talk about these issues. We should be able to present ideas that are innovative, and that's been suppressed. So at the time when it was announced that the drugs would be decriminalized, and I saw open drug use, it was enough for me. I joined the Conservative Party, and here I am. I'm your candidate.
Thank you, Gwen. We will now hear from Leah.
Thank you so much. I moved my microphone. I hope that hasn't changed things. Hello, I'm Leah Versavell, and I'm running in the Nanaimo Lantzville newly created riding for the Green Party. This is a new opportunity in so many ways. Even though I have run in both provincial and federal and civic elections in the past 10 years, this is an opportunity for real change. When the ridings were reconstructed earlier this year, it was an interesting opportunity, I think, for people to reevaluate their allegiances. Nanaimo has historically been an NDP town. However, I have found through my political interests in the last 10 years that the Green Party has made huge advances here on the island. Let me just step back a little bit. I came to the island in 1971. I was the eldest of 5 kids who came with my mom to live in Victoria. I'm the only person who was born in Alberta. But I think one of the best things that ever happened to me was moving here. I did not realize how involved in the ocean and the environment and the entire lifestyle that this island would have on me and on my family. I went to UVic. I did a degree in sociology. I went to Royal Roads University later in life and did a Master of Arts degree in conflict analysis and management. I also did a diploma in public administration through the University of Victoria and served on the alumni board for several years. I find that education is key, and I applaud every one of you for coming to listen and learn tonight. I think that the most interesting thing about the party platform in this election is that we are putting people first, not corporate interests. And that is why I'm so happy to see so many people out participating and interested and ready to vote. Thank you so much.
So now let's move on to the questions. As a reminder, candidates will have an opportunity to offer rebuttal after all candidates have responded to a question. Only 2 rebuttals during the evening, folks. We're rotating the order of responses for the candidates for each question so that everybody gets a fair chance to be first, second, or third in the answering order. Our first question tonight, a general topic submitted by residents. Can you tell me what you've done for your community prior to running or being elected without pay? So positions in volunteer, committees, boards, how long were you there? And what do you feel was a positive outcome for the community? Starting with starting with George, starting alphabetical.
I thought we were actually starting based off a reversed order, but I guess this is the opening, so you're changing that. Is that correct?
We're rotating the order, so you would go first this time, second next time,
Okay.
third next time.
Great, fantastic. Well, let me tell you, I think 2 minutes might not be enough, but that being said, I've been part of Big Brothers and Big Sisters as an in-school mentor, which at Brecon Elementary School, I had 2 in-school mentees, and they were individuals who came from challenging homes. And one of the things that I was able to do for them is give them a role model as someone who is investing in this community at a very young age. And probably one of the heartwarming things of that experience was having these young people come to me many years later and saying, you know what, you made a significant difference. It was great having someone to be able to talk to and discuss some of the challenges that they were dealing with at home. Another institution that I've been part of is the Nanaimo Ladysmith Schools Foundation, where we provided breakfast programs to people in the community. You know how challenging it is for a child to be able to go to school when they don't even have breakfast. And that's what our Schools Foundation was focused on, and trying to make sure that young people, as they were going to school, had the tools that they needed in order to be successful. I've also been the president of Literacy Central Vancouver Island, and this year we actually established a new bursary for young people who are going into post-secondary education and are going to pursue a career that enhances literacy or promotes social justice. And I could tell you a number of other organizations that I've been involved with, such as the Nanaimo Art Gallery and so on, but I've received the Sterling Award for Distinction from the Greater Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce, and also in 2016, the Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia presented me with the BC Achievement Award for my ongoing work in helping make our community a better place. So that would be my response. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Gwen, please.
I echo George in saying that going over your history of volunteerism can be quite lengthy, and in my experience in running for office, most people that run for office have done a lot of volunteer work. So I put my work into 5 categories. One would be fundraising campaigns, bike-a-thons, workplace challenges. 2, serving on boards, so supportive housing, and a governor on the University of the Fraser Valley Board of Governors. International work, I spent some time in Guatemala helping to build a school. And 4 would be environmental work, so paddling for wild salmon, river cleanups, and speaking out over a hazardous waste facility that was going to be built on the shores of the Fraser River. But I really want to focus on what I've been doing recently, as I have gotten older. And I have had some substantial experience in leadership. I really feel compelled to work with new emerging leaders because I think that's incredibly important. So in Nanaimo, I've worked with 2 organizations and I've had the opportunity to mentor new leaders. A lot of these people come from the MBA program that I was really fortunate to have graduated from and give back to, and actually one of these people is here tonight. I feel very strongly about building up the future of leaders, and I have seen a lot of people that I've worked with go on and get incredible positions.
Thank you, Gwen. Leah?
Thank you so much. I'll start with the volunteer work that has taken up most of the last 20 years of my volunteerism, and that is being a member of the Lions Clubs International. I have served twice as a district governor, and for people who are involved in organizations with global reach, such as Lions and Rotary and Kinsmen, you will know that these are huge positions of responsibility, but also opportunities for working with people from many sectors and lifting people up, particularly those who are in poverty. My involvement has now extended to working with a group that is largely sponsored by the Lions. It's a senior citizens housing association where we have 40 units of housing down in Ladysmith, actually, and these rents have been kept to between $400 and $600 for many, many years. We are now looking to build another 40 units in the near future. And so working both with children, with educational institutions, and with seniors has been my record. I have also been involved for the last 2 years as the president of the Cowichan Family Life Association, which is a group that trains peer counselors to work with those suffering mental health challenges. Thank you.
Has been identified as an issue of great importance to coastal communities in Central Island region. What would you do as an MLA to advocate in the BC Legislature for local governments to be able to protect key watersheds that supply safe, sustainable drinking water for their communities? For instance, would you support local governments purchasing privately owned land to protect watersheds, environmental and land conservation in the region? Gwen.
Was this question 19?
5.
Well, I would just have to say that John Rustad has been very clear of the importance of drinking water and just announced recently that he'd be working especially with Indigenous communities to make sure that drinking water is safe and secure. So my party as a whole, is incredibly supportive of drinking water. It would fall seriously under common sense because we need water to survive. And I myself have had a lot of experience advocating for communities when I was a former member of the Legislative Assembly. So I'm very familiar with the process and the steps that it takes to meet with key stakeholders, identify the issues, and then raise those issues with caucus.
Leah.
Thank you. One of the platforms of the Green Party, of course, is to preserve and conserve areas of the province, not only for human life, but for the biodiversity that we know and appreciate here. As a member of the Nanaimo Fish and Game Club and prior membership in the Victoria Fish and Game Protection and Conservancy Club, I have learned a great deal about conservation and watershed protection over the last few years. My involvement with those two clubs originated because I worked in law enforcement and also worked for the Attorney General for 27 years here in BC. I believe that the relationship moving forward between all levels of government and Indigenous governance as well is critically important to preserving water now and long into the future. Water is life. We cannot live without it. I went to a council meeting in Lantzville just a couple of weeks ago where people were beyond upset with the grant, well, not with the grant so much that was received from the province, but with the conditions that were attached to that grant, where some people were being forced to close off their wells and hook up to a water system with the RDN, where they felt that they couldn't possibly afford this connection fee and that it was going to alter their lifestyles considerably. It has forced people to put their houses up for sale and to really reconsider their lifestyle in Lantzville. And I think this is going to continue to be a critically important question.
George.
Thank you, Kendall. Having healthy watersheds is very important. When I was on City Council back in 2011 through 2014, I actually had the opportunity to visit our watershed. And let me tell you, a very impactful experience to see where we actually get our water and the fact of how important it is to protect it for future generations. And that's why this government has actually put hundreds of millions of dollars into conservation efforts. 300 million into conservation efforts to protect rare forests, $150 million to boost watershed security, and protecting biodiversity. This is real action, making sure that we have sustainable water for the future. The BC Conservatives, what did they talk about when it came to protecting our watersheds? We're actually doing too much to protect the environment. This is also a party that says that climate change isn't real. That climate change isn't real when we are seeing more droughts, we are seeing more fires, we're seeing a lack of sustainability within our communities. That's what you'll get with the BC Conservatives. A lack of environmental protections, a lack of water, and less watershed protections in our communities.
The next question also relates to climate change and the environment. Watershed security, environmental and land conservation is a key election issue for the region. For example, the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere region includes 5 watershed regions and the coastal Douglas Fir Moist Maritime Biogeoclimatic Subzone. Despite being designated as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve in the year 2000, this biosphere region remains the most at-risk zone in BC and is a conservation concern. What will you do as an MLA to advocate for and advance efforts in the legislature to protect and conserve biodiverse areas in central and northern Vancouver Island? And we'll start with Leah.
Thank you so much. After the first time that I ran with the provincial government, or for the provincial government, I realized that I had a lot to learn. And so I took another course at another university. This one was with Thompson Rivers University, and the course was in physical geography. And again, it struck me that the importance of our water, even though some other governments tend to think of us as a faucet that just has to be turned on, is actually something we need to stand in very, very close protection of. We understand, because we live here, that our trees cannot possibly grow to the height that they have for millennia unless they are protected in their water and in their capacity to live in a diverse ecosystem. Forestry has tended to take down the most valuable wood and replace it with a monoculture, which has not been wise, as we are now seeing with the fires and droughts that are plaguing us. Water conservancy is a critically important issue. And as an MLA and as a member of the Green Party, this will be a priority moving forward. We also, again, need to work closely with all levels of government, including Indigenous governance, to ensure that we are all on the same page on this critically important issue. Thank you.
And now George Anderson.
Thank you, Kim. Again, as I've mentioned, this government's actually focused on taking action on climate change and with respect to conservation. We've saved 2.4 million hectares of at-risk and old-growth forests, something that the Conservatives would be against because we're conserving too much. Again, this is their party, not mine. We've worked with Indigenous communities and have created a fund of $300 million that's led by Indigenous people to fund conservation. Again, this is taking action, doing what's necessary to protect future generations. When I was valedictorian in high school and at university, I said we don't inherit the earth from our parents, but we borrow it from our grandchildren. And that's what we need to, that approach is what we need to do with our environment, our economics, and our healthcare. And that's what this BC NDP government is doing, whereas we are at risk of losing conservation efforts with the BC Conservatives. They're talking about cutting $4.1 billion from healthcare. They've talked about how conservation efforts we're doing too much. Again, this is what's at risk with this upcoming election, is making sure that you have water that's there for your grandchildren, and making sure that your children have places to go into the forest. That's what's at risk with Ms. O'Mahony and the BC Conservatives.
Thank you. Gwen O'Mahony.
I think what's really key here is local consultation and local decision making. Unlike the power-hungry NDP, which are enforcing rules on municipalities like we've seen with zoning rules and zoning laws. And I see that George thinks I'm, I don't know, scary because I support local democracy and local say. But let me tell you something. It's not one size fits all, okay? Communities know what's best for them. This is a big province. There's different needs in different areas. And John Rustad has been very, very supportive of returning building codes and returning democracy to local municipalities. He has a track record of that. When I think about this issue, I was looking at other jurisdictions, and perhaps, well, this question wouldn't come up, quite frankly, George, if the NDP was doing such a good job. We look to places like Costa Rica, where they take conservation very seriously and actually have removed it from government. Those are some really interesting models. And as MLA, I will definitely meet with people that are involved and definitely start brainstorming on ways that we can protect the watershed.
Thank you.
You get this question first, George. It's a short one. Where do you stand on First Nations reconciliation?
Well, I can tell you, Kendall, that our communities are only stronger when we work together, when we work with our Indigenous partners, and that's what this NDP government's done. For example, when I speak about conservation, there's a partnership working hand in hand with our Indigenous community, trying to create equal opportunity, because too often we've seen the breakdown of what happens when we aren't working alongside our Indigenous partners. I can tell you as a commercial lawyer, having more and more litigation is not the answer. We should be spending that money on healthcare. We should be spending it on education. And with the BC Conservatives, actually, John Rustad often wears a moose hide pin, and just yesterday, they asked him to stop wearing it. You'll see, actually, Kim Smythe is wearing one right now. But the reason that they asked him to remove it is because of his lack of respect for Indigenous people. And that is a problem. We won't be able to advance what we need to do in our province unless we're working alongside Indigenous people. So again, that's what we're facing, is going back to a time where we are not working with our Indigenous partners, we're disrespecting them, and going to be in the courts dealing with land claims for decades. And that's a cost that we can't afford right now.
Gwen.
Thanks. I'm so glad I can be here to talk about the history, because all too often revisionist history seems to be the thing that NDP candidates, I guess, like to do. John Rustad was a Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, and he signed over 435 agreements. That's more than any other Canadian politician in modern history. The Conservative Party, under John Rustad's leadership, is committed to Indigenous relations and committed to reconciliation, committed to making sure that Indigenous people will share in the economy, committed to being able to have their own project, their energy projects. Under the BC NDP, Haida Gwaii has been waiting 4 years for a small solar project. They can't figure out what they're doing. This is a difference between talking and doing. I think the NDP has become a party that is a party of establishments, slick signs, slick slogans, but not a lot of real, actual work. And as for the Moose Hide campaign, it was John Rustad that got the Moose Hide campaign the seed money to start that campaign in the first place. Here we need to talk about the truth, not about fancy words, but about action.
Leah.
Thank you. Reconciliation is a term that has been used by nations around the world for many, many different reasons. I think what I would like to emphasize is the truth part of the equation. Truth first needs to be put on the table. There are still so many people living on Turtle Island who have no idea what happened in the last 200 years, of the genocide that took place, of the damage that has been done, not only to people who attended the residential schools, but also the generations that have followed. We need to put the truth out there on the table every day and acknowledge that there have been significant harms. We need to realize that the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People cannot be retracted or modified or tinkered with. Thank you. The United Nations worked hard to make sure that this legislation was brought not only to the UN, but that the province then also took responsibility. And we need now to make sure that those 94 calls to action are implemented in our day-to-day existence, particularly for students. And I look at the work around the room and think, finally we're making some progress. Thank you.
We're going to go into a series of questions on healthcare now. What is your plan for increasing affordable, accessible in-treatment addiction programs, specifically ones that use trauma-informed and personal accountability practices as the core of their treatment? And we'll start with Gwen.
Well, this is really a subject that is near and dear to my heart. Really, we have to start with transitioning to treatment-based approach. Right now, the province is engaged in so-called harm reduction, and that harm reduction is actually causing more harm to people and to communities and to family members. So we need to focus on building treatment centers and encouraging people to get into treatment. And the party has been very clear from the beginning, from the get-go, that that's what we're going to do. I'm going to give you one example with my own personal family. My nephew really wrestled with addiction, and he went through detox at the hospital. And there was a 3-week wait before he could go from detox into treatment. And in that time, we were really nervous as a family. Thank goodness he had a family to be around him to keep him safe while he waited to get into the program. And then it was a $1,000 fee to get into that program. We can do better. We have to do better. We have to make sure that there is a seamless movement from detox to treatment, and then when the person comes out of treatment, that they aren't put back in the same communities where there's a lot of drug use. There's a lot of work that has to be done. And I'm very happy about this question, and the answer to all the different forms of treatment is yes, yes, and yes.
Leah, please.
The question is around affordability of treatment. And it strikes me that one of the key elements of addiction is asking ourselves, why did this start? Why do people turn to substances to alleviate their pain? Why do people use unprescribed medications? And it all comes back to a social fabric that is falling apart. People are not able to afford homes. People are not able to afford groceries. People are not able to find work. This is a complicated problem. But I can tell you, after working in the corrections system for many years, and after working in social services programs for many, many more, forcing people into treatment is not the answer. Involuntary care does not fix the problem. People need to want to escape addiction. People need mental health services, and these must be covered by our medical services plan. We have an obligation to train more people to work in the mental health field and to request, if not require, that they stay in the province to work. We are facing an incredible loss of life, and this cannot continue. Thank you.
And George, please.
Addiction, it just doesn't discriminate against anyone. All of us know an individual who may have faced addiction issues. I think of a friend of mine from high school who unfortunately is no longer with us, who was a phenomenal bass guitarist, who unfortunately ended up dealing with addictions, and now he's no longer here. He was 30 years old. I remember when this happened in April, and it was devastating. But the fact is that we need to be doing something, and we need to be doing something now, which is why this government has opened 650 new treatment spaces. Here in Nanaimo, right behind Northfield Road, we see 10 spaces at Edgewood, which is a world-renowned treatment facility for addictions. I know, as the chair of the Board of Governors at Vancouver Island University, that the university's received $300,000 to assist individuals who are experiencing addictions. Again, these are the steps that we need to be taking to be able to help people who are having these challenges. These are people's moms, dads, brothers, and sisters who are dealing with these issues on a regular basis. And it's the BC Conservatives and John Ristad who closed Riverview in 2012. It was John Ristad who cut services to young people who were then let out onto the streets. They cut crime prevention, they cut services continually, and then again, O'Mahony's going to be upset that I say this $4.1 billion again, but that's what they're talking about, cutting $4.1 billion from care. So you hear her saying so-called harm reduction, and they're very clear. John Ristad said that they were going to close all of these services. So today, you might hear Ms. O'Mahony saying yes, yes, yes today, but tomorrow you're very likely to hear her saying no, no, no tomorrow, and flip-flopping as they have over the past 2 weeks.
Thank you, George. We have 2 rebuttals from the table.
How long is the rebuttal?
Pardon me?
How long is the rebuttal?
I believe it's 1 minute.
Oh, good.
So, Gwen, you were first to flag it, so go first, please.
Nanaimo has approximately twice the per capita drug overdoses across BC. And BC, across Canada, has the highest per capita drug overdoses. So, George, will you brag about the services that the NDP are providing? I think that is disrespectful to those of us who have lost loved ones and those of us actually who can see outside when we walk around downtown Nanaimo and can clearly see that there is a very, very big issue in front of us. There's approximately, I think, 25 detox beds in the Central Island. It's a very poor service. It's not even worth giving yourself a pat on the back for. And certainly, I see that perhaps you've been coached to bring up this $4.1 billion, so I'll address it now. There's no way in the world that we are going to cut health care. If you take a look seriously at our health care plan, it's actually going to cost more to deliver because we're expanding health care. So this, I was trying to figure out where you're getting this number, and it's absolutely asinine. But it's a way to distract from the issue, and the issue is the province has fumbled the drug addiction crisis.
Thank you. And we'll go to Leah now for rebuttal.
Thank you. I wanted to use this opportunity to say how disappointed I was, Gwen, with the video that you made about the safe injection sites and about the harm reduction facilities. I wonder how many lives have been lost since you made that video. And I also want to express my disappointment in the leadership of the NDP, George. I cannot understand why a politician, the leader of your party, would roll back a decision that had been made to supply safe materials that was recommended by doctors and professionals in this field. It's incredibly disappointing, and the loss of life continues.
Thank you. And George with the rebuttal as well.
Of course, Kim, thank you very much. You know, we've heard Ms. O'Mahony talk about bold solutions and innovative solutions. Well, let me tell you what's asinine: cutting doctors, cutting nurses. $4.1 billion, you know where that comes from? John Ristad saying that we're going to remove our GDP from 12.4% to 11%. The math is simple. I know that might be difficult for some of the BC Conservatives out there, but it equals $4.1 billion. So that's the challenge of what we're dealing with. Of course, we need to be able to invest in these services, but let me tell you, the asinine position comes from Ms. O'Mahony talking about cutting these services, from John Ristad at first saying, no, we're going to cancel all of these services. Then 10 days ago, he says, thank God that we have overdose prevention sites. You can't trust them. One day they'll say one thing, the next day they're going to say the other. So flip-flop, flip-flop. What you see here is, I'll just be very quick, is that their positions are as stable as a weather vane in the middle of a hurricane.
Thank you, George. Gwen has flashed another rebuttal card up, so Gwen, please.
That's rich coming from the party that has pretty much stolen our platform as we've moved along. I was on CKNW early morning show, I believe, doing a discussion about involuntary treatment, and about 4 hours later, verbatim, I saw that the EB had put out exactly the same talking points. And as for the carbon tax, EB kind of flipped on that as well. So let's go back to healthcare. Let's talk about something really important, the elephant in the room. And that would be the deficits that this NDP government has been bringing in. Listen, you like healthcare? We need to be able to pay for it. And we're not going to be able to pay for it if the NDP keeps on this spending spree and reducing our economic viability. Heck, the forestry industry alone, if it was firing all forests, would be able to cover this $8 billion deficit that was introduced. Well, $8 billion, actually, it's probably more than that, but there you go.
Thank you.
This second healthcare question goes to you first, Leah. What concrete steps will your party be taking to repair the fractured healthcare system?
I was pleased to be able to attend the meeting that happened a couple of weeks ago here in Nanaimo around the lack of a cath lab and a patient tower, and was very encouraged by so many candidates stepping up and signing the pledge. However, long term, our medical services are in dire need of repair. We have the opportunity now to incorporate healthcare across the spectrum. And I'm talking about the spectrum of life. We have prenatal care. We have maternal care. We have programs for kids who are entering school, and we have vaccination programs that have saved lives and saved health. We need to extend this, and the Dogwood model that is part of the BC Greens platform puts the responsibility and the accessibility of healthcare back into local communities so that we are not running all over the place trying to find services. Many people simply don't have the capacity to get to the treatment that they need in remote parts of the province, and by that I will even include Vancouver. Because if you're traveling from here to downtown Vancouver, it's a road trip. It's a major expedition. We need to bring these hubs to local communities where all kinds of healthcare services, including labs, and including counseling services, including dietitians and people who will work with people at every stage of their life, whether they are already healthy and maintaining their health, or whether they are facing critical medical challenges.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.
George.
Right now, we're dealing with significant challenges when it comes to healthcare. People are having challenges finding family doctors, or having challenges with respect to surgeries and getting access to cancer services. Again, this government has been very focused on taking action for people when it comes to healthcare. We've had 128 new spaces opened at UBC, a new medical school in Surrey to train the next generation of doctors, and here specifically in Nanaimo, we've seen a new intensive care unit that's been built. We see a new high acuity unit that will have 12 beds that's in construction and will be opening shortly. We have 300 long-term care beds that are going to be built in Lantzville. And I was very happy to host a town hall with David Eby last Thursday, where we announced that we would be building a new patient tower at NRGH. This is responding exactly to what the community's asked for. And you see there's can I have 8 seconds of my time since the Conservatives are stealing it? But that being said, we are focused on making sure that we take action for people. I can say even from Donna Hayes, the chair of the Fair Care Alliance, saying, great, the NDP government is listening to people in the community and taking action. That's what's happening. That's what's happening with this government. And if you know, right behind Country Club Mall, not too far away, you'll see that there is a new urgent and primary care facility that's opening. You can go and take a look on your way out because it's not too far from here. But why do we have these deficiencies in healthcare? Because people like John Ristad, people that Miss O'Mahony is wanting to be in government with, cut services for so long throughout our system here in British Columbia.
Gwen.
Well, George, I've been out there a little longer knocking on doors, so roughly over 6 months, and it's really horrific what I'm hearing from people. A year-long wait to see a specialist for suspected skin cancer. My own brother, for goodness sakes, needs a hip transplant, and he still hasn't seen a specialist, and it's been 6 months. I think perhaps the NDP have spent too much time behind closed doors concocting long-winded legislation to control healthcare practitioners and take away their ability to actually have freedom to be able to interact with their patients and actually focus on healthcare. The reason why this seat is getting a lot of attention this election is because we are very close in the polls, George, as you are well aware. The NDP had no desire to build the hospital tower and still hasn't promised on the cath lab. Now, let's talk about our Patients First healthcare plan that the Conservative Party of BC wants to roll out. It's going to be bold, okay? It's going to be a single pay system, but it's going to expand through public and non-government facilities. So we can be able to reduce the wait times. We can help British Columbians find family doctors. Almost 1 million of us don't have one. We will protect and support frontline staff. Let's remember, the NDP thought it was a great idea to put active drug users smoking crack and meth in hospitals besides seniors in the same care facility and tell nurses to put on a gas mask. Thank you.
And Leah.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Rebuttal, George.
Thank you. There goes Ms. O'Mahony with her fun lines from the video she's making. But the fact is that this government's focused on cancer care. Another announcement, 2028, which it's, again, doing more for people, a BC cancer unit here in Nanaimo. We've seen surgical wait times go down 15.7%. Again, there is a lot that needs to be done. I am not denying that there are challenges out there. But why do we have those challenges? It's because of the fact that people like John Ristad cut services. They cut healthcare. And you may have missed a key word that she said there. Public and non-governmental services. What are we talking about there? Privatizing our public health care here in British Columbia. That's what they're talking about. That's where the $4.1 billion cut in healthcare comes from, because they're going to move our public services into the private system and actually reduce healthcare for everyone, so long as you can pay for it.
So our final question on healthcare, and our most robust one yet. The RDN has one of the fastest growing and oldest populations in Canada, and these trends are expected to continue. We have a higher percentage of seniors in the rest of the province, a population with significantly higher healthcare needs. The population complexity of medical needs across the entire Central and North Island is also growing, where our health infrastructure at NRGH does not meet modern standards. There are also significant disparities between healthcare infrastructure and specialized services available south of the Malahat versus north of the Malahat. Recently, all three party leaders have made campaign commitments to build a new patient tower at NRGH. If elected, what will you do to ensure these projects move forward as quickly as possible and bring more specialized services to residents in the Central and North Island? And we're starting with George on this one.
Thank you, Kim. Again, as I've mentioned, I was happy to be able to host this town hall with David Eby, where we announced a new patient tower. Again, we've worked with the regional district. We've also worked with the regional hospital board. Ian Thorpe is here, who would know a lot about the fact that this regional district, which I was a part of for 3 years, actually is putting the money aside to be able to build it. It's going to take some time, but the fact is that we're actually making these investments for healthcare here in Nanaimo. We've seen a new intensive care unit. We have seen a lot of investment that Nanaimo has often been ignored. And David Eby and the BC NDP have focused on making sure that these investments are here. As I mentioned, go and walk around and you will see the new urgent and primary care facility. That's actually taking investment and putting it into this region. Whereas again, Ms. O'Mahony's talking about non-governmental resources. You're not going to see you're not going to see a patient tower because they'll end up saying, you know what, it costs too much money. You're talking about a deficit. Well, let me tell you, how do you build a patient tower? It costs money. It's a reality. The same of having nurses. We've hired 6,300 nurses, 800 new family doctors this year. That's, again, what we need to be doing. And yes, it costs money, but let me tell you, the fact is that this will mean that there will be healthcare resources for your children, your grandchildren, and many other individuals. So making sure that this happens fast, it's going to take some time, but it'll be working alongside the regional district to ensure that they have their portion of funds to be able to pay for the new patient tower and continue to do these type of services and type of investments in our community. Bless you, by the way. That's what we need to be doing. Thank you.
Gwen.
Thank you. I think she's allergic to dishonesty. Where were you, George, when the Fair Care Alliance had a public meeting that was really important? Brett Fee, our candidate for Oceanside, Dale Parker, my colleague for Nanaimo Gabriela, myself, the two Green Party candidates, we all showed up and we listened to our community because that's the role of a person who is running for office. You show up. You show up whether the people like you or not. You show up. We publicly signed and declared our support for the tower and for the cath lab. I think that needs to be recognized. It wasn't until those polls showed that Nanaimo Lantzville is leaning towards conservative that EB jumped in and made a last-ditch effort to say that he's going to build the tower. Let me tell you something. The news is reporting on this tower. We badly need it. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's cockroaches apparently in the hospital. But here's your track record, your party's track record. This one example is a Surrey hospital. It was announced in 2019 that you were going to build it, your party, but it didn't. It got pushed aside until 2023. It would have been 1.7 billion, but because you stalled out, it ballooned to 2.88 billion. And now it's going to be until 2030 before that hospital's built. This comes down to trust. Vote for me, vote for the Conservative Party of BC. That tower will get built.
Thank you. Leah, please.
Thank you. One of the ways that we can immediately begin to make more doctors and healthcare professionals available to us is to facilitate the accreditation of doctors and other medical persons who are new Canadians, who are, thank you, who are here living amongst us and yet unable to work in their professions. This is a challenge not only, of course, in medicine, but also in education and many other sectors of our economy. It's not a Band-Aid, it's not a one fix, it's an ongoing challenge that we must train nurses and doctors and all medical professionals locally. My daughter is living in Australia. In Australia, they have recently made it possible for students coming out of high school to enter a 4-year nursing program. If they can qualify to get into the program, the government will pay their tuition. They are not faced with student debt. They are not faced with unaffordable housing because they are housed while they are taking the programs. If Australia can do it, so can we. Thank you. We have so many people in this province who do not have a primary care physician. Again, this dogwood model that the Greens are putting forward brings healthcare services right to a local community. We also need to encourage people to use 811 resources. Call a nurse, call a health professional before they go to the ER and to urgent care facilities. We have within the RDN programs where people can access resources. My time is up.
This question will go to Gwen first. Right now, BC residents pay more per liter of fuel, gas, and diesel than anywhere in North America, impacting our cost of living significantly. Will you, one, confirm your understanding of the BC versus federal carbon tax, and two, what is your party prepared to do to reduce the profit gouging of oil and gas companies, and what other actions will you take to lower fuel costs in BC?
Oh, okay, just a minute. All right. So I'll give you a little bit of history on the carbon tax. I think I'd mentioned I had ran on the BC NDP Axe the Tax platform on the carbon tax because of our concern about poverty and affordability. So carbon tax was introduced in BC in 2008, and it was priced at $20 per ton. This year, it's 80. The federal government in 2019 also introduced a carbon tax and told the provinces either you introduce one or we'll do one for you. And this is sort of the crux of this issue, is that the carbon tax has ballooned and it's impacting everything, groceries, business, industries, except for maybe some of them that are exempt. So we are fighting to ensure that the carbon tax is removed. Now, the other question about price gouging, and basically what you're asking me about is economic game theory, how organizations come together and they collude, they reduce their production, and they push up the price. And I think that's been an issue for years. And what we can do, though, is we can work on that carbon tax.
Leah.
Sorry, I have to get my thought down here. Thank you. Question is around lowering fuel costs. When we think in this kind of linear fashion, we forget that there are alternatives. At the moment, the carbon tax benefits more than 65% of the households in British Columbia. The carbon tax comes back to lower income families and households and is critical, particularly at this time, in helping people to afford groceries, services, transportation, and housing. One of the platform pieces that was announced yesterday by the BC Greens is a free transit program. We also must improve our transit corridors. When I was again at the Lantzville City Hall meeting a couple of weeks ago, they talked about extending more services from the regional district of Nanaimo through the Lantzville corridor. And there are people who do want transit if it is convenient, if it is accessible, and if it is timely, so it gets them where they need to go at the times of day when they need to do that. We also have to look at the fact that it is not the people who are consuming the least who are responsible for increasing costs. Polluters must pay. This is a basic tenet of the Green Platform. We know that we cannot continue to rely on fossil fuels. We have climate scientists, not only here but around the world, telling us of the benefits of solar and wind and hydrogen and tidal resources. We know that we have to transition. Thank you.
George.
Thank you, Kendall. To answer your question, one, there are two carbon taxes. There is a federal carbon tax and there's a provincial carbon tax. British Columbia has had a carbon tax that actually the government that John Ristad was part of was the one that brought in the carbon tax. And now they're talking about removing the carbon tax. The federal carbon tax is different. It has different requirements, but British Columbia already has a model in place. So there's the first part of your question. The second part is, what is our party actually prepared to do to reduce profit gouging? There are challenges right now with affordability, high interest rates, the cost of food. It's very challenging out there. As a young person, I can tell you that average rent in Nanaimo is $1,900 a month, and people don't have wages that are meeting that. And so our government's actually been focused on giving breaks where it will actually help people. So that's in childcare. That is also with respect to housing and creating a long-term strategy for housing so that there is actually affordable housing. When I was on council, the average house price was $310,000. It's now $875,000. Why did that happen? Because of the fact that the BC Conservatives, people like John Ristad, allowed for there to be real estate speculation, which our government actually got rid of and made sure that real estate speculators were not in the market, which opened 20,000 new spaces, new condominiums within British Columbia. So that's what we are doing. And further, to speak directly to polluters paying, we actually created legislation through the BC Utilities Commission to take on big polluters and oil and gas companies. So that's what this government's focused on, taking action for people, where the BC Conservatives would remove those protections for everyday individuals. I might also add, because the 30 seconds didn't go down, I was also endorsed by BC, the former leader of the BC Green Party, Andrew Weaver, just yesterday. Sorry, Leah.
Continue on the theme of the economy and affordability, and segueing from where we just were. As MLA, how will you make rents and home ownership more affordable for British Columbians, especially on Vancouver Island? Sorry, we're starting with Leah on that one.
Okay. Let me first focus on seniors, since I recognize so many of my fellow seniors here tonight. For us, this has become an incredible problem. We have worked our whole lives. We have saved to the extent that that was possible. And now our shelters are full, particularly of women who cannot afford their own place to live. With the project that I'm working on in Ladysmith, we are trying to keep rents to 30% of a person's income. For most seniors, if they don't have private pension plans or they don't have pocketfuls of RRSPs, that means they're paying between $400 and $500 for their units. Now, we know that this is an unusual reality. We know, as George mentioned, that rents average close to $2,000 a month for a one-bedroom place within our new riding. New places are being built, but they aren't always going to be affordable. And affordable is such a strange word. Affordable to whom? It's certainly not affordable for people who are on these limited incomes, for people who are trying to survive on PWD or income assistance, to look for market housing. It really is just not out there. You're going to have to live with other people that you may not know. You're going to have to work to the extent that PWD allows you to do so, or you are going to be living on the street. This is a bleak future. And this is why the BC Greens have committed to building more affordable housing as quickly as possible. Time flies, doesn't it? My time is up again.
Gwen?
I just want to say, Leah, I do like that you highlighted seniors are actually most at risk, one of the most at risk people for homelessness. The NDP wanted to float around a $400 rent rebate. They announced it, re-announced it, and re-announced it. And then the income testing was just so severe that it really didn't reach very many people. That's why I'm really happy with John Rustad, who has introduced the Rustad rebate, which is a really aggressive income tax savings that will help the middle class who've been really, really stretched. And lots of you here know what I'm talking about, especially young families. This rebate is for rent and mortgage, because we do know that about approximately 50% of British Columbians had to renew their mortgage, and the mortgage rates went up, and that really stretched things. And George, I too was endorsed by the leader of the BC Green Party, Stuart Parker. Thank you.
And George, please.
Thank you, Kim. BC is a great place to live. I was born and raised here, like many of these. Well, except for Leah, it's okay. You're from Alberta. We'll just speak a little slower. Teasing. I'm teasing. But that being said, is that BC is a wonderful place to be. You know, people want to be able to raise their families here. They want to be able to stay close to their families, and that's a challenge right now. And that's why this BC NDP government is focused on creating 300,000 affordable housing in British Columbia. That's a plan for middle-class people. John Rustad has focused on only helping real estate developers. They allowed for real estate speculation that drove up prices. Imagine being a young person today trying to get into the housing market. Here in Nanaimo, $875,000. Why did that happen? Because people like John Rustad didn't focus on building any housing in British Columbia. They just said, come in and have a great time and drive the prices up. When we talk about seniors, there's 62 affordable seniors homes that were built by this government. There's 321 supportive housing units, and also with respect to people, first-time home buyers trying to get into the housing market, the BC NDP has announced a new plan where the government would cover 40% of the costs for individuals who are first-time home buyers. This is a real plan that's going to help individuals who are trying to get into the housing market. Again, that plan, if people end up selling it, the government will take part of the additional revenue as well in order to be able to create more affordable housing into the future. Again, John Rustad, I don't need to keep saying it, but this is a person who's had a plan of only helping the 2%, and the BC NDP has been focused on helping people. That's why we have more affordable housing units in Nanaimo than we have had before.
This will be the final question before our closing comments from each of you. Crime and public safety. The BC Regional District Crime Trends Report 2013 to 2022 reported a steady increase in criminal code offenses year over year. Similarly, violent offenses increased year over year. Catch and release seems to be more and more prevalent in BC. What steps will your party take to reduce rising crime in BC? And we'll start with you, George.
Thank you very much, Kendall. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their communities. I can tell you, you go to downtown Nanaimo, people don't feel as safe. My sister doesn't feel safe walking through parts of our community now. And that's a really big challenge. Again, what we've done is we've hired 250 new police officers. We've expanded the prison at Brennan Lake to ensure that repeat offenders are staying in prison. We've also taken on the federal government and asked and requested and demanded for changes to bail reform so that repeat offenders are not going back out on the streets. We've also taken on organized crime, as many of you will know, with the Civil Forfeiture Act, the BC Hells Angels. That organized crime has existed in our community, money laundering has existed, but this government has said that enough is enough and has taken on those individuals, which is why you don't no longer see the Hells Angel facility in downtown Nanaimo. Again, oh, you can keep clapping. I'm not going to be upset about that. But that being said, we're taking action and actually hiring people to make sure that people feel safe in our community. There's a lot of work, and that's why we've also announced for individuals who are dealing with challenges of not being able to help themselves when it comes to mental health and drug addiction issues. We've also announced more work with respect to involuntary care. Again, this is something for people with traumatic brain injuries who are unable to, when you see people down on the street who are laying face down, they need additional help, and that's why we've announced new secure facilities, with the first one to be opening in Maple Ridge, and new facilities across British Columbia in the time thereafter. So this is what this BC NDP government is focused on, is making sure that people do feel safe in their communities. Whereas we know when it comes to crime prevention, John Ristad cut crime prevention services.
Gwen.
This is where we need to take a data-driven approach when looking at an issue. For the first time in years, violent crime is on the rise in British Columbia. Previous, it had been decreasing, but under the NDP's watch, it's climbing every year and getting worse. There are people who have been let out, like their charges have been dropped or stayed because of the length of time it's taken for a case to make it to court. And some of these have been very, very serious. It's a mismanagement of time and a mismanagement of resources. We should have zero tolerance for violent and repeat offenders. There are repeat offenders that are on the streets right now. The Conservative Party believes that's wrong. We'll appoint principal judges, increase funding for law enforcement and more prosecutors. And also there's a key piece missing, and that's prevention. We need to work with communities and fund communities to prevent the cycle of crime. My video highlighted a very serious bust that occurred at a safe injection site. These people were employees selling drugs. The woman who was arrested had a loaded pistol in her backpack. I wasn't just doing it for the likes. I'm pointing out the fact that we've got serious problems in our community and across BC, and this happened on the NDP watch.
Leah.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, part of my early career was working with the BC Attorney General. I worked within a closed, locked facility for children. It was called a youth detention center, but it was a juvenile jail. I then worked as a probation officer, and part of my duties were to write reports when people were applying for bail or for sentencing or under parole. I honestly believe that our first responders need more support. They need better funding. We need to empower not only our fire departments, our paramedics, but also our police forces. And working with all of those first responders, we need to bring mental health professionals to those teams so that we can help people who are in dire need of assistance. The safety issue is important. I wonder why, in so many situations, we feel that we are not safe. Is it that we're being terrorized by false arguments about how scary these people are? The biggest threat to a person with a mental health condition or a drug addiction is themselves. These people need help. Our party wants to put people first. It also wants to empower all of us to address appropriately concerns before they become out of control. We need to empower our BC prosecution services to be able to lay charges after police have so diligently completed their reports.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you.
So that wraps up the question and answer portion of the evening. Now we move on to closing comments, and we'll start with George Anderson, please. 2 minutes.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you everyone again for being here. This has been a wonderful discussion amongst the candidates about our various visions for what BC needs. My parents' dreams were that my siblings and I would have endless possibilities and have lives that were better than their own. And they taught me from a young age that no one gets ahead without the help of others. And that's what I focused on throughout my time as a young person, helping with the Salvation Army and serving as a city councillor and through many other organizations in this community. I've been very fortunate to have endorsements from people like former Mayor John Rattan, former Attorney General Colin Gableman, Diane Brennan. A list goes on of people in our community who know the work that I've done. And that's what I would like to continue to do as your MLA. And that's what this government is focused on, trying to make lives better for everyone. And you know, it's dark right now because they want to really focus on what I'm trying to say. But the fact is that Ms. O'Mahony talks about the videos that she's doing, and she's a perfect example of politicians who are no action, talk only. That video is solely about the problems that exist and no single solution. And that's the risk with the BC Conservatives. They want to cut $4.1 billion from healthcare when people need access to healthcare. They'll cut crime prevention and only make cuts for the 2% as they did in the 2000s. The BC Conservatives are not a serious party. They say things such as COVID was started by cell phone towers. John Ristad said, how did we convince carbon-based beings that carbon is the problem with the environment? We know that because we listen to science, we listen to experts, we listen to evidence. Their positions change from time to time, and you don't know what is consistent for them. And you know, that's the challenge with the BC Conservatives, is that their words are as worthless as a degree from Trump University. So again, that's what we need to be focused on, is serious work for people. And so on October 19th, I ask you to vote for the BC NDP and George Anderson as your MLA.
Gwen O'Mahony.
Well, I came to this debate with a set of questions that were given to me in advance, and I thought, well, this seems like this is going to be boring if I can't take questions from the audience. And I got to say, George, Leah, what a fun night this has been. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So I was a member of the NDP, George, Leah, and my life was great, okay? It was wonderful. I have a great life. The thing is, this province is not on the right track. I had friends in government. I could have used those. I guess I could have just stayed as I was in a nice, happy place. But I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that because I have principles. So think about this. 6 months ago, I left an established party, has tons of money and resources, and joined up with the Conservative Party, which, by the way, hasn't been in power in years, okay? With limited resources. Some people would even have called it a fringe party. And then I decided to run in Nanaimo Lantzville with a 2% chance of winning this seat. I didn't do it for glory. I did it because I believe in what we've talked about today. This province is in trouble. We need to turn it around. And I believe that we can do this. And let me tell you, in 6 months, I know a lot of people feel the same way because we are neck to neck, and I'm going to continue to fight for real common sense change.
Time for us to take it home with Leah.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this, to all the people who have facilitated this conversation this evening. The questions were thoughtful and across a wide variety of topics. I think this has been an opportunity for each of us to show who we are, what we believe in, what we value, and our vision for the future. I'm not talking about a 4-year election cycle future. I'm talking about generations to come. And when I think of the students who will walk in here tomorrow, I want them to feel hope. I want their children to feel hope. I want to make sure that we have a planet that is viable and livable for generations to come. It's quite frankly exhausting to listen to fear-mongering and sparring and attacks. I came with a positive vision. And I will take this positive vision through the next term of our legislature. I truly believe that the only thing that matters is not who endorses you, but who endorses you at the ballot box. Your vote is critically important. We have had very few people, often a third of our population who is eligible to vote, turn out at the polls. Please make this a difference this year. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I think there's a promise of sticking around and doing some one-on-ones with the audience here tonight. So, excellent. And Ian, do you have some words in closing?
Very, very briefly, Kim. Yes, thank you. I just have some thank yous to pass along before we do have time for a meet and greet. So first of all, thank you, all of you, for taking time out of your busy lives to attend this evening, to be part of the democratic process. It is so important, and it's so gratifying to see a full house here tonight. So thank you for your interest in democracy and the upcoming elections. And I'll just repeat for your benefit, and you can pass this along to friends and family, a recording of this evening's forum will be posted on the RDN YouTube channel over the next few days, so you can watch for that. I would next like to thank our candidates, Gwen and George and Leah. Thank you all three for being here. You shared your perspectives on the topics that were covered, and you know it takes courage just to put your names out there, to step forward, to be willing to run for office, and I admire that for all three of you, whatever the party. So thank you very much, all of you. And next, a thank you to our moderators for doing a great job, Kim and Kendall. We appreciate your work this evening. I want to thank School District 68 for the use of their facility. And lastly, if I may, a real shout out to all of the members of the RDN staff who have really worked hard to organize and put this event on this evening. And a special thanks, and she's standing very modestly at the back, Megan Riddell, who is the event coordinator. Megan? So, thanks everybody for your civil participation this evening. Candidates and guests, you're welcome to mingle for a brief period of time. We'll keep the doors open until 9 o'clock. So have a good evening, everybody, and please get home safely. Thank you.